The forgotten tomb. The desert stretched for miles, an ocean of golden sand beneath the burning sun. The air shimmered with heat, making the horizon blur like a mirage. Daniel Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead and adjusted his scarf. His boots sank deep into the sand as he climbed over another dune. "Anything yet?" his partner, Dr. Lewis, called from behind. Daniel checked the scanner in his hand. The device beeped faintly, indicating something beneath the surface. Something massive. "It's here," Daniel said, breathless. For years, legends spoke of an ancient tomb hidden in the desert, a place older than any known civilization, but no one had ever found it. Until now. The discovery. Daniel signaled his team to start digging. The archaeologists worked fast but careful, using advanced excavation tools to remove the layers of sand. Minutes passed, then hours. The hunger that never faded. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The woman's grip on his wrist was ice cold, yet burned beneath his skin. Her fingers trembled, weak but unyielding, as she pulled his arm closer to her lips. Her red eyes burned with hunger, but it wasn't just desperation. It was instinct. Daniel tried to pull away. "Wait." She winced, her entire body shuddering. She was starving, dying, and she wasn't asking anymore. "Not water," she whispered again. Her fangs gleamed in the dim light. "Blood." A choice in the dark. The rest of the team stood frozen, watching in horror. Dr. Lewis finally found his voice. "Daniel, get away from her." But he didn't move. Something inside him told him this wasn't an attack. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She was fighting herself. Her grip trembled. Her lips were barely parted, her fangs hovering just above his skin. But she hesitated. She was resisting. Daniel exhaled slowly. "You need this to survive, don't you?" he asked. Her glowing eyes flickered with something unexpected. Surprise. Then, slowly, she nodded. Daniel made his choice. He turned his wrist toward her. "Then take what you need." The first taste. The moment her lips touched his skin, a jolt of energy shot through Daniel's veins. His breath hitched. His body tensed. This wasn't just losing blood. It was something more. Something deeper. For a moment, the world blurred. Asterisk, asterisk memories. And then they hit something solid. "We found it," someone shouted. The sand was cleared away, revealing a massive stone structure. Its surface was carved with symbols, glowing faintly, despite being buried for thousands of years. Dr. Lewis frowned. "This isn't Egyptian. It isn't anything I've ever seen." Daniel's heart pounded. They had found something truly unknown. He stepped closer, brushing his fingers against the carvings. The moment he touched them, a strange hum filled the air. The stone was warm. And then, without warning, the ground trembled. The sealed sarcophagus. A deep rumbling echoed from within the tomb. The sand around them shifted violently. Daniel stumbled back. Everyone moved. The team scrambled away as the stone beneath them split open. A massive sarcophagus rose from the ground, its surface engraved with the same glowing symbols. But this was no ordinary tomb. It wasn't aged or broken. It looked untouched, as if it had just been sealed yesterday. Dr. Lewis gulped. This isn't possible." Daniel approached slowly, his fingers trembling as he ran them over the smooth surface. It was cold now. Too cold. Then something clicked. The seal on the sarcophagus began to move. The lid shifted on its own. And then it opened. Something was inside. A deep breath echoed from within. The air turned ice cold. Daniel's entire team froze in place. Inside the sarcophagus was not treasure, not bones, not a corpse, but a woman, a breathtakingly beautiful woman, her skin pale with a soft shimmer, her long black hair cascading like silk. She was not dead. She was asleep. Dr. Lewis gasped. "No, that's impossible." Daniel stared in disbelief. The woman's body was wrapped in tattered, ancient fabric, but her chest was rising and falling. She was breathing. And then, her eyes snapped open. The hunger that never faded. Her eyes were not human. They glowed red. A deep, inhuman thirst burned in them as they locked onto Daniel. Before he could react, she moved. Too fast. In the blink of an eye, she grabbed his wrist. Daniel gasped. The coldness of her touch burned like frostbite. Her lips parted, revealing sharp, elongated fangs. Her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. Water. Daniel quickly grabbed his canteen, unscrewing the cap. He tried to lift it to her lips, but she didn't drink. Instead, she grabbed his arm, pulling it closer. Her red eyes darkened with something primal. Not water, she whispered. Blood. The blood awakening. Daniel gasped as the first sharp prick of fangs met his skin. A strange warmth spread through his veins. Not pain, but something deeper, something ancient. His vision blurred. The tomb walls faded. For a fleeting moment, he was somewhere else. A city bathed in twin moons, a throne of obsidian and gold. A woman, her, but different, stronger, fiercer. Then, a war. Fire, blood, screams, a kingdom falling into darkness. Daniel's body jerked back to reality. The woman, Xyra, had pulled away. She staggered, exhaling sharply. Her red eyes flickered, as if trying to focus. She had taken so little, barely a sip, and yet it had changed something. Not just in her, in him. Something more than human. Daniel stumbled, his pulse pounding. His body felt lighter, sharper, as if something inside him had awakened. Dr. Lewis rushed to his side. Daniel, are you? But Daniel could barely hear him, because Xyra was staring at him. Not with hunger, with shock. It cannot be, she whispered. Daniel frowned. What? Xyra took a slow step forward. Her gaze locked onto his wrist, where his blood still lingered on her lips. Her breath trembled. Your blood. It carries the mark. Daniel's heart stopped. What mark? Xyra inhaled sharply. You are not just human. The forgotten bloodline. The rest of the team stood frozen, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Daniel clenched his jaw. That's impossible. Xyra's silver fingers grazed his wrist, feeling the faint glow beneath his skin. She looked up, her voice low. No, it is fate. The symbols on the sarcophagus flickered, responding to something. To him. To his blood. Daniel felt it again. That strange pull. Not from her. Not from the tomb. But from within himself. The ones who buried her return. Before he could question further, the ground beneath them shook violently. Xyra spun toward the entrance, her red eyes narrowing. Daniel heard it too. A distant hum. A shadow stretched across the sands. Dr. Lewis cursed. We have company. Daniel turned toward the tomb's opening, just in time to see the warships descend. Not human, not friendly. Xyra's voice was ice cold. They have come to finish what they started. Daniel's pulse spiked. He had woken up something ancient, something dangerous, and now those who buried her were coming to bury her again. But this time, Daniel wasn't about to let that happen. The ones who bury the past. The ground trembled, dust cascading from the tomb's ceiling as the low hum of warships grew louder. Xyra's red eyes burned with recognition. She knew this sound. She had heard it before, thousands of years ago. And last time, it had meant the end of her people. Daniel's heartbeat pounded. His body still felt off, changed, stronger. But there was no time to understand it now, because the ones who buried Xyra alive were coming back. And they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The arrival of the hunters. Outside the tomb, the sky darkened as the warships descended, their hulls sleek and black, adorned with eerie silver glyphs that pulsed like living veins. Daniel and his team ducked behind the ruins, watching as the ships opened, and figures dropped silently onto the sand. They weren't human. Tall, too tall, clad in dark metallic armor, their helmets smooth and featureless. They moved as one, like shadows given form, stepping toward the tomb's entrance. Daniel's gut twisted. They weren't here to explore. They were here to erase. Zyra's hands curled into tight fists. "They are the Kareen," she murmured, her voice edged with fury. Daniel frowned. "Who?" Her gaze remained locked on the approaching figures. "The ones who destroyed my kingdom." Daniel swallowed. "Why are they back now?" Zyra's red eyes flicked toward him. "Because I woke up." And then, the lead hunter lifted its hand. A wave of energy shot forward, slamming into the tomb entrance. The ancient stone shattered, and the warriors stepped inside. The power in his veins. Daniel barely had time to react before Zyra grabbed his arm and pulled him back. The hunters moved with inhuman precision, their weapons glowing with an eerie blue light. One of them raised a bladed staff, aiming directly at Zyra's chest. Daniel's instincts screamed, "Movi." And before he could think, he did, faster than he should have. One moment, he was behind Zyra. The next, he was in front of her. His hand shot out, catching the blade mid-swing. And then, golden energy exploded from his palm. A shockwave ripped through the chamber, sending the Kareen warrior flying. Silence. Daniel stared at his hand. The glow, the warmth, the power. This wasn't just Tyra's energy. It was his. "You were never just human." Ira's gaze snapped to him, eyes wide. "You?" she whispered, taking a step closer. "You should not have been able to do that." Daniel's chest rose and fell heavily. His hand still glowed faintly, the same energy that pulsed in the glyphs on Zyra's sarcophagus. Dr. Lewis stumbled back. What the hell was that? Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know." Zyra grabbed his wrist, her fingers trembling. She closed her eyes, and then her expression changed. Shock, recognition, fear. "You carry the blood mark," she whispered. Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" Zyra slowly exhaled. "It means..." She glanced toward the fallen hunter, her expression darkening. "They are not just here for me anymore. They're here for you." The hunt begins again. The fallen Kareen warrior staggered to his feet. More figures stepped into the tomb, their helmets tilting slightly toward Daniel, as if reassessing the threat. And then, the lead hunter spoke for the first time. His voice wasn't deep. It wasn't monstrous. It was cold, mechanical, final. "He must be taken." Zyra's eyes burned. "Over my dead body." The hunter lifted his blade. "That can be arranged." And then, they attacked. The blood of the forgotten. The tomb shook with the force of battle. The Kareen warriors moved fast, their dark armor reflecting the eerie glow of their weapons. Energy blades sliced through the air, hissing like liquid fire. Daniel had no time to think. His body reacted on its own. He dodged, too fast. His movements weren't just reflexes. They were something else. Something not human. Zyra stood beside him, her fangs bared, her red eyes glowing. "Do you feel it now?" she asked, her voice like a whisper in his mind. Daniel's hands burned with golden light. "Yeah," he muttered, "and I don't know if that's a good thing." The awakening. The Kareen charged again, their weapons pulsing with blue energy. Daniel moved, without thinking. He reached out instinctively. The moment his palm touched the lead warrior's chest, a blast of golden energy erupted outward. The Kareen warrior was flung across the tomb, slamming into the ancient walls. More of them rushed forward. Zyra moved with blinding speed, her hands glowing with a deep crimson light. She twisted through the air, striking with precision, claws cutting through armor like it was paper. Daniel should have been terrified. But he wasn't. because he was fighting just like her. His hand sparked with power, and for the first time he realized he had been made for this. You were never just an explorer. Styra stopped, watching him. Daniel panted, his body still buzzing. What the hell is happening to me? He demanded. Zyra's expression was unreadable. You're awakening. Daniel shook his head. Awakening into what? Zyra took a slow breath. She reached toward his arm, toward the glowing marks that now burned beneath his skin. You carry the blood mark, she murmured. The mark of my people. Daniel frowned. I thought your people were wiped out. Her voice dropped. Not all of them. The secret of the blood mark. A loud explosion shook the tomb. The Careen were bringing in reinforcements. They didn't have much time. Zyra stepped closer, her voice urgent. The blood mark isn't just a symbol, she explained. It's a key, a connection. Daniel's heart pounded. A connection to what? Zyra's red eyes flickered. To the throne of the firstborn. Silence. Daniel exhaled sharply. What does that mean? Zyra looked toward the Careen ships outside, her expression hardening. It means you were never just an explorer, Daniel. She turned back to him. You were always meant to be something more. The war they didn't know they started. The Careen commander stepped forward, his energy blade crackling. He didn't hesitate. He spoke a single command. Kill the hybrid. Daniel's blood ran cold. Hybrid. Before he could ask, the Careen charged. Zyra moved first. She leaped forward, faster than the human eye could follow, a flash of crimson light slicing through the air. Daniel had no choice but to fight. But this time, it wasn't about surviving. It was about understanding who he really was. The truth was out. The Careen weren't just hunting Zyra. They were hunting him. And if they were calling him a hybrid, that meant he wasn't fully human. The truth written in blood. The tomb was collapsing. The walls cracked and splintered, ancient stone crumbling under the force of the battle. Dust and debris filled the air, making it harder to see, harder to breathe. But Daniel wasn't focused on the destruction. He was staring at his own glowing hands. Golden light pulsed beneath his skin, spreading up his arms like veins of liquid fire. His heart pounded, too fast, too strong. This wasn't normal. This wasn't human. And the Careen knew it. The enemy that knew him first. The Careen surrounded them now, their black armor reflecting the eerie glow of their weapons. But they weren't rushing in. They were hesitating. Zyra noticed it too. She took a slow step forward, her red eyes narrowing. Why do you fear him? The lead Careen warrior straightened. His helmet retracted, revealing a face that was almost human, but not quite. Dark eyes, sharp cheekbones, skin like polished obsidian. He studied Daniel, tilting his head slightly. And then he spoke. Because he is not yours. Silence. Daniel's blood ran cold. Zyra stiffened. What do you mean? The Careen warrior exhaled, his voice like metal scraping against stone. The throne belongs to him. The hidden lineage. Daniel staggered back. No, he muttered. You've got the wrong guy. The warrior ignored him. His black eyes flickered toward the golden light still burning on Daniel's skin. Your blood carries the mark of the firstborn, he said. Zyra's breath hitched. The firstborn, she whispered. That's impossible. That bloodline was wiped out thousands of years ago. The Careen's expression didn't change. Clearly, it was not. Daniel's pulse slammed in his ears. Everything he had believed about himself, asterisk, his life, his identity, his humanity, asterisk, was starting to fall apart. He shook his head. I don't even know what the hell a firstborn is. Zyra turned to him, her expression unreadable. The firstborn were the first rulers of my kind, she said slowly. Not just kings, gods among mortals. She took a sharp breath. And they were hunted. All of them. Erased from history. Daniel's throat went dry. But if that's true, his voice came out hoarse. Zyra's red eyes locked onto his. Then you are the last. A throne never claimed. The Kyrene warrior stepped forward. This war, he said, was never about her. Asterisk, 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 it was about you. Daniel's body felt too heavy, too full of energy that wasn't his. He clenched his fists, feeling the heat beneath his skin. You're saying this whole time, I was the target. The warrior nodded. The throne has waited for you, heir of the firstborn. His voice was calm. But if you will not take it, he lifted his blade. We will erase your bloodline forever. Daniel's vision blurred. Not from fear, from rage. Something inside him snapped, and the golden energy that had been flickering under his skin erupted outward. The power that shouldn't exist. The explosion of energy ripped through the tomb, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. The Kyrene stumbled back, shielding their faces. Zyra gasped, shielding her eyes from the blinding light. And Daniel felt everything. Every part of him was alive in a way it had never been before. The tomb responded to him. Symbols lit up across the broken walls, ancient text burning like fire. Not alien, not forgotten. They were his birthright, the one they will follow. Zyra's red eyes widened. She whispered something in her language, something that made the Kyrene freeze. Daniel turned to her. What did you just say? Zyra's gaze locked onto his. Her next words changed everything. I called you by your true name. She took a slow step forward, voice barely above a whisper. My king, the throne that calls for war. The golden light pulsed through Daniel's veins, burning like liquid fire. He should have been terrified, but he wasn't, because for the first time since he opened that sarcophagus, he understood. This wasn't about Zyra. This wasn't about the tomb. This had always been about him, the choice that would change everything. Zyra stood before him, her crimson eyes wide with shock and reverence. She had fought for survival, for revenge, for her people. But now, she was looking at something bigger. A ruler. My king, she whispered again. But this time, it wasn't just words. Daniel felt it. The weight of an entire forgotten empire. The Kyrene warrior stepped forward, his gaze unreadable. You carry the blood, he said, but will you carry the throne? Daniel clenched his fists. I didn't ask for any of this. The warrior tilted his head. You were never meant to ask. You were meant to rule. The throne of the firstborn. The tomb rumbled beneath them. The ancient symbols across the walls shifted, forming new patterns. Then, the ground split open. From the center of the chamber, a structure began to rise. A throne. Not just any throne. It was carved from a material Daniel had never seen before, obsidian and molten gold, pulsing with power. It wasn't just a seat of power. It was alive. Zyra took a slow step back. This is it, she whispered. The throne of the firstborn. The Kyrene warrior bowed his head. Daniel swallowed hard. His entire body hummed as the throne's energy pulled at him. He took a single step toward it, and the moment his foot touched the ancient stone, the past came flooding back. Visions of the lost empire. Daniel wasn't in the tomb anymore. He was somewhere else. A city of towering black spires stretched across an alien sky. The air was filled with the hum of energy, the whispers of a people long gone. He stood on a balcony, not as an explorer, but as a ruler. He turned and saw her. Not Zyra. Another woman with golden eyes and a crown of dark metal. His mother. She touched his face. You will be the last, my son. Then, fire. Screams. Betrayal. The Kyrene descending like shadows, slaughtering everyone in their path. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. You must sleep, my love. You must survive. And then, darkness. The awakening of a king. Daniel's eyes snapped open. He was back in the tomb. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body shaking from the memories. Zyra was at his side, gripping his shoulders. "Daniel, what did you see?" His voice was hoarse. "My past." The Kareen warrior watched him closely. "You remember now, don't you?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I remember everything." The war that had never ended. The realization hit him like a shockwave. The Kareen hadn't come to kill him. They had come to stop him from remembering. Because he wasn't just a survivor. He was the last heir of a lost empire. And now that he was awake, they had failed. Zyra's fingers tightened around his wrist. "If you take that throne," she said carefully, "there is no turning back." Daniel met her gaze. He could walk away. He could disappear into the stars and never look back. Or he could do what he was always meant to do. He stepped toward the throne. And then he sat. The return of the firstborn. The moment Daniel's body touched the throne, the entire planet responded. The ground shook violently, the sky above splitting apart as ancient warships, hidden beneath the sands, began to rise. The Kareen warriors knelt immediately. And Tyra, for the first time since she awoke, she smiled. "You were always meant to return," she whispered. Daniel's eyes glowed golden. A deep voice echoed across the chamber. Not his, but something older. "The war is not over." Daniel slowly stood. "No," he said, "but this time, I fight back. The legend begins. The firstborn has returned, and the galaxy will never be the same." The end.